This game was crazy. All right, this game was crazy. In the first half, the Indiana Fever looked amazing. They were hot, on fire. I could have sworn their jerseys was on fire the way that they were balling. Yo, when I say they were shooting the lights out, let's give it up for Lexi. In that first quarter, it was Lexi's game. Can I get a whole yeah? That's what was going on in that first quarter, fam. And she was just completely...
Lexi Holt just shocked everybody. With the Indiana Fever running out of bodies thanks to injuries piling up, she stepped onto the court like a player with nothing to lose and everything to prove. The result? A career night that turned heads across the league. Fever fans are buzzing, the highlight reels are rolling, and suddenly the conversation has shifted. The question now isn't just how good Lexi Holt can be. It's how long this Indiana team can survive the chaos and keep finding heroes in the middle of disaster.
Set at 164.5 as Lexi Hull dials up a three.
Before we dive in, let me throw this out there. Was Lexi Hull's breakout just a one-night spark? Or is this the beginning of her becoming a legit force for Indiana? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this debate is wide open. Now, let's lay out the scene. The Fever are battling a nightmare stretch. 4 rotation players are already gone. Caitlin Clark has been sidelined since July 15th with a groin injury. SOPHIE Cunningham tore her MCL. Sydney Colson is out with an ACL tear. And Ari McDonald's shut down with a foot injury. Brutal enough, right? But it got worse. Against Minnesota, Chloe BB was scratched last minute with knee soreness, and Odyssey Sims went down in the fourth quarter and never came back. That's 6 players missing. 6. On a roster already stretched to its limit. Absolute catastrophe. Don't forget to subscribe for more Fever breakdowns, WNBA updates, and daily hoops talk. Only here on Celeb Zone Daily.
But we're right there. So I think we can head into Sunday's game with a little bit of confidence on we can compete against anybody.
And right in the middle of all that chaos, Lexi Hull rose to the occasion. She didn't look shaken by the injuries, the pressure, or the extra weight suddenly on her shoulders. Instead, she treated it like an opportunity she'd been waiting for. From the opening tip, her energy was different. The first few shots, pure. Her cuts, crisp. She wasn't just drifting in the flow of the game. She was actively hunting for chances, demanding the ball, and creating plays. That mindset shift was everything, and it completely changed the tone of the night.
The defense was there. The hustle was there. I liked everything about what was going on in the first quarter. They were just outplaying the Lynx. They looked really good, right? And then we get to that second quarter. The second quarter, I loved how the entire team turned on fire. I mean, they were on fire, scorching, heating it up.
By halftime, Hull had already dropped 18 points, the kind of output you'd normally expect from Kelsey Mitchell or a healthy Caitlin Clark. But on this night, it was Lexi's show. Every bucket fueled her confidence, and that confidence spread like wildfire. She wasn't tentative, she wasn't second-guessing. She attacked open lanes, pulled up for threes without blinking, and forced Minnesota's defense into panic mode. The Fever bench erupted after every shot, feeding the momentum. You could feel it. Her teammates believed in her, and the fans watching at home could feel that same surge of energy right through the screen.
5th time in her career as Boston goes backdoor to Hull, working on Williams. Hull.
Here's the thing. Lexi Hull wasn't just putting up numbers in meaningless minutes. What she did against Minnesota was the definition of impact. Every bucket came while Indiana was still in the fight, trading blows possession for possession. She wasn't padding stats when the game was already decided. She was producing in the moments that mattered most. That's why this night was different. It wasn't luck. It wasn't a fluke. It was a player stepping into a role the Fever desperately needed and delivering under pressure. And let's be real, it raises a question that's been floating around all season. Why has Hull been sitting in the background for so long? Head coach Stephanie White has leaned hard on SOPHIE Cunningham, Kelsey Mitchell, and of course Caitlin Clark when healthy. Hull. She's usually been penciled in as a spot-up shooter, a hustle player, someone to give energy in short bursts. But with the roster stripped down to its bare bones, Hull showed she's capable of so much more. She didn't just play her role, she expanded it, proving she can carry weight as a focal point. After the game, Hull made it clear what was driving her. Asked about her mindset, she said, "We're missing people, so everyone's got to do a little bit extra, be a little more aggressive offensively. That was my mindset going in." That's not just filler talk. That's a player who recognized the moment. understood the responsibility, and leaned into it without hesitation. White noticed, too. Post-game, she praised Hull for being aggressive, for hunting her own looks, for not fading into the background. And that's always been the knock on Hull, that she can disappear when others are dominating touches. But this night was different. She flipped the narrative completely. Instead of waiting for opportunities, she created them. She was decisive. She was confident. And defenders had no choice but to respect her presence. The stat line tells the story. Hull finished with 23 points on 9 of 16 shooting, including 4 of 7 from 3, while logging nearly 37 minutes. That's efficiency. That's volume. That's the workload. Most importantly, she looked comfortable doing it. No deer in the headlights energy. No nerves about the responsibility. She looked like a player who'd been waiting for this exact stage and wasn't about to waste it. So here's the real question. What happens next? When Clark, Cunningham, and the rest of Indiana's roster return, does Hull slide back into the shadows? Or does this performance force White to rethink rotations? Because if we're being honest, the Fever may have stumbled onto a silver lining in this injury chaos. Hull showed she's ready for more than just a supporting role. And if Indiana's smart, they won't let this momentum go to waste.
Unbelievable third quarter from Stephanie White. Coming out once again, I will never back off of this. If you come out flat in the third quarter, if you give up leads in the third quarter, I'm going to question you as a coach. Because what is it are you doing at halftime? It's clear. What happens is the team that's down goes in, they make adjustments at halftime. They come back out. They apply those adjustments. The coach that is winning the game needs to be prepared to be able to make an adjustment to their adjustment, because the adjustment is coming. No, Stephanie White, no, I don't do that. That's above my pay grade.
Here's the frustrating part. As great as Lexi Hull's night was, it still wasn't enough to hide the reality that Indiana is falling apart without 6 key players. At some point, the story has to shift from celebrating Hull to asking bigger questions about the Fever as a whole. Right now, this team is being held together with duct tape. Injuries have shredded the rotation, and every game feels like a desperate patch job. Take Shea Petty, for example. She literally just signed and was tossed straight into the fire. To her credit, she hit 3 of 4 threes and gave Indiana 10 points in her debut, which is impressive considering she barely knows the playbook. But asking her to suddenly step in and run the offense like Caitlin Clark? That's not realistic, and it showed. What used to be smooth, organized possessions turned into messy, rushed basketball. Boston fought for position inside, but the passes were late or at the wrong angle. Instead of working through her, Indiana's offense devolved into bad jumpers and careless turnovers. By the third quarter, the fatigue was obvious. Rotations slowed down, closeouts were lazy, and Minnesota took full advantage. The Lynx blew the game open with a 32-7 run in that quarter alone. And let's be honest, that collapse isn't new. This has been the Fever's pattern all season. Strong first halves, then a third quarter meltdown once opponents make adjustments. Fans are already pointing at Stephanie White for the lack of in-game tweaks, and nights like this don't help. Minnesota spread the floor, drove right at them, and killed them on the offensive boards, while Indiana just kept running the same broken coverages. That's not grit, that's stubborn coaching. Even Boston, who finished with 15 and 6, looked too passive at times. She spent too many possessions standing outside instead of planting herself in the paint. Without Clark, this team needs her to dominate, not disappear. Man, let's talk about Aaliyah Boston for a second. Because if we're being honest, she had one of those nights that leaves you shaking your head. For 3 quarters, she was practically a ghost, barely made an impact. Then all of a sudden in the fourth, she woke up and rattled off 8 points in a hurry. But by then, too little, too late. This Fever team can't afford for Boston to coast through most of the game and only flip the switch at the end. Not when Caitlin Clark is sitting out. Not when Sophie Cunningham is gone. Not when half the roster is being held together with hardship contracts. Boston has to set the tone from the start, not just try to rescue things at the finish. Now, Kelsey Mitchell, she did her job. She looked like a star out there. Dropped 27 points, handed out 5 assists, and kept the pressure on Minnesota all night. Every time the Fever needed something steady, it was Mitchell stepping up. But here's the thing, she needed a running mate. She needed someone to share that scoring load. And surprisingly, that someone was Lexie Hull. Hull absolutely went off. Career best type of performance. She finished with 23 points, hit shots with confidence, and carried herself like she belonged in the spotlight. Her energy was contagious. The bench was fired up, the crowd was feeding off it. And for a while, it really felt like she was keeping Indiana in the fight. That's huge for her personally. But let's be real. The fact that Hull had to play second option on a night like this shows just how thin this roster is right now. And then we've got Natasha Howard. Phew, rough game. She tried to bring the ball up the court twice. One ended in a turnover, the other in an offensive foul. On top of that, Jessica Shepard just owned her. Shepard dropped a triple-double, 22, 11, and 11, and honestly looked like the best big on the floor. That's a problem when Boston and Howard are supposed to be holding it down in the paint. Meanwhile, Minnesota's depth just crushed Indiana. Kayla McBride lit them up with 29 points. Natisha Hiedeman came off the bench and poured in 17. Every time the Fever started to close the gap, boom, McBride or Hiedeman would hit a dagger and kill the momentum. That's what a deep, balanced team looks like. So yeah, Hull's breakout was awesome. Mitchell was rock solid. Even Shea Petty chipped in with some surprise offense. But with 6 players out, those efforts can only take you so far. Right now, the Fever just doesn't have the margin for error. And the scary part? The schedule only gets tougher from here. If the Indiana Fever are going to keep their playoff hopes alive until Caitlin Clark comes back, they're going to need more nights like the one Lexie Hull just delivered. Her career performance wasn't just exciting, it was essential. Hull played with a confidence and aggression that Indiana has been begging for from its supporting cast. But here's the reality check. One player's breakout can only carry you so far when half the roster is sidelined and you're patching lineups together with hardship contracts. That became painfully clear in the fourth quarter when Odyssey Sims went down. Suddenly, Stephanie White had no choice but to throw Shea Petty into the fire. Keep in mind, Petty had just signed, hadn't practiced with the team, and didn't even know the sets. She still managed to give them 10 points, but asking her to seamlessly run the offense was unfair. What Indiana played wasn't structured basketball, it was survival basketball. Mismatched lineups, broken possessions, players trying to figure things out on the fly. And Minnesota? They feasted on it. The Lynx saw the cracks and went straight at them. They spread the floor, attacked off the dribble, and pounded the offensive glass until Aaliyah Boston was left trying to guard multiple players at once. The third quarter turned into a bloodbath. Minnesota outscored Indiana 32-7. That was the turning point. The Fever's defense collapsed, rotations lagged, closeouts were slow, and the whole thing unraveled. What stings is that Indiana actually came out strong in the first half. Hull was hunting shots and knocking them down. Kelsey Mitchell was steady, forcing the defense to respect her every possession. The Fever hit from deep, moved with pace, and looked like they could hang with one of the league's hottest teams. But then halftime came. Minnesota adjusted. Indiana didn't. And just like we've seen all season, that lead disappeared in the blink of an eye. This is the pattern that frustrates fans the most. First half fight followed by second half collapse. Stephanie White has taken heavy criticism for her lack of in-game adjustments. And this was another glaring example. Minnesota mixed up their defensive coverages, spread Indiana out, and dictated the pace. The Fever? They kept doing the same things, even as they stopped working. That's stubborn coaching, plain and simple. Now let's talk personnel. Hull's night was inspiring, but she wasn't supposed to be the second star. That's Boston's job. And while her stat line of 15 points and 6 boards looks fine on paper, she disappeared for long stretches. Too often, she floated around the perimeter instead of demanding touches in the paint. Critics were quick to point it out, and they're right. Indiana can't afford for Boston to be passive. Not with Clark out. Not with Nalissa Smith, Erica Wheeler, and Grace Berger banged up. Then there's Natasha Howard, who had a night to forget. She struggled mightily, even turning the ball over trying to bring it up the court. Worse, she got flat-out outplayed by Jessica Shepard, who put up a triple-double, 22 points, 11 rebounds, and 11 assists. Shepard looked like the most dominant big on the floor, and that's a major red flag when Boston and Howard are supposed to anchor your front court. Add in Kayla McBride torching Indiana for 29 points and Natisha Hiedeman dropping 17 off the bench, and it's easy to see how the Fever were outclassed. Still, credit where it's due. Kelsey Mitchell once again carried the offensive load. Her 27 points and 5 assists kept Indiana in it for as long as possible. Without her steady hand and Hull's explosion, this would have been a blowout by halftime. Mitchell deserves her flowers. She's been the backbone of this team since Clark went down, and she rarely gets enough recognition for it. But when you zoom out, the problem isn't effort, it's depth. The Fever are trying to compete with 6 players out, including their franchise cornerstone. That's not sustainable in a playoff race. Right now, Indiana sits in 6th place, but the margin is razor thin. They're just half a game ahead of 7th and barely a game and a half clear of 9th. One more collapse, one more third-quarter meltdown, and they could slip out of the postseason picture entirely. Hull's emergence, though, changes the equation slightly. She showed she can handle bigger minutes, shot creation, and even defensive pressure without folding. The question for Stephanie White is this: when Clark comes back, does Hull keep that role? Or does she get shoved back into the corner as a supporting piece, risking all the confidence she just built? That's a decision that could shape the Fever's future, not just the rest of this season. Indiana can't survive on flashes. Yes, Hull's night was incredible. Yes, Mitchell continues to shine. But when your defense gives up 95 points, your bigs get outplayed, and your coach refuses to adjust, those flashes fade fast. If the Fever do make the playoffs, it won't be because of defensive schemes. It'll be because Clark returns in time, and the shot-making keeps them afloat. Until then, every game feels like the season is hanging by a thread.